The best laid plans upset by weather. That's what happened during Little Bear's and my Prius road trip to visit friends in Virginia Beach and tick off a few more Civil War bucket list places. Blazing heat and humidity like I have never felt enveloped us the entire trip. Visiting friends was awesome, but walking Civil War battlefields was downright dangerous. Our plan to Prius camp was out. It was just too hot, mostly for Little Bear. I was concerned for the little guy, so we stayed in Motel 6s and even canceled our plans one day just to stay inside and recover from the heat. How hot, do you ask? Well, this bad. Some friends in Richmond invited me to give a talk to a group of folks at their home. So after a barbecue lunch, by consensus, we got in the pool, including Little Bear, and I gave the talk from there. It was the coolest venue ever. Adjoining the VMI campus is Washington and Lee College, and taken together a Civil War buff's dream. Now, back in 1861, Thomas Jackson was an unpopular professor of artillery at VMI. At the outbreak of the war, being a West Point graduate and a veteran of the Mexican-American War, he was called up to defend Virginia. Of course, we remember him now as General Stonewall Jackson. His exploits in command of the Army of the Shenandoah made him the devil in Northern eyes and a beloved hero in the South. After the war, Washington College enticed Robert E. Lee to its presidency, and he led the college until his death in 1870. He is interred here in the Lee Chapel, along with his warhorse, Traveler. The college was later renamed Washington and Lee. Stonewall Jackson is of course celebrated for his battlefield brilliance, yet few know his image is enshrined still today in the stained glass windows of Southern black churches. Blacks recognize and continue to appreciate his illegal teaching antebellum slaves to read and write. A devout Christian man, he fought passionately for his state, but he abhorred slavery. Odd how some history is hidden from us, isn't it? So from Lexington we headed east, ultimately aiming for friends in Virginia Beach. But first a stop atop the Blue Ridge Mountains and the magnificent views, even though it was overcast. Then finally on to Richmond and another stop on my Civil War bucket list. When reading about the Civil War and visiting battlefields, you become very familiar with the characters of the war, and there were plenty. But to bring them to life and feel a bit more of who they were, there is nothing quite like visiting their grave sites. So Little Bear and I headed to Richmond, and particularly to visit Hollywood Cemetery. It's the final resting place for a couple of presidents and numerous Confederate generals, and it was well worth the time. Despite being overcast, it was sweltering hot and time to take Little Bear to air-conditioned comfort and a well-deserved nap. So from Richmond, it was off to Motel 6 in Virginia Beach and some welcome relief from the heat. We spent the next several days with friends touring the area, partaking of restaurants and enjoying ourselves, including a private tour of the old town of Portsmouth. It was a blast, and Little Bear recuperated to his old energetic self. Then it was off to tour Petersburg National Military Park. More heat and poor Little Bear. So with only a couple of days left in the trip, it was time to put the whip to the pony and head for the finish line. Little Bear and I got an early start and hit the Petersburg National Battlefield Visitor Center with plenty of time to tour the grounds. We were due in Richmond that afternoon for a southern barbecue and swim, so it was going to be a full day. The Petersburg Battlefield is beautiful now, but was ugly mud in 1864. It's difficult to understand how this part of the war unfolded while on the grounds, because it was a siege line and went south from Richmond for 15 miles to Petersburg. Grant had concentrated, determined to break the Confederate hold on Richmond indirectly by taking the vital supply railroads coming into Petersburg. So worried about Little Bear's welfare in the blazing heat and humidity, we concentrated on the area around the crater. Grant got convinced that Pennsylvania coal miners stationed on the line could tunnel under the Confederate siege works, plant a massive charge, and blow an ungodly hole in the rebel line. With troops poised to then charge through, they could take Petersburg in a matter of hours, and General Lee would be forced to retreat, and Richmond would fall. Well, that was the plan, and it might have worked had it not been for a reoccurrence of a problem that plagued the Union Army since the outbreak of the war: bad leadership. It might have worked if the general leading the attack was not 5 miles in the rear, completely drunk, leaving his troops leaderless when the blast went off. But now here is where it gets interesting. The vanguard troops leading the way into the crater charged anyway. Their mission was to take and hold the breach, while then more troops advanced into Petersburg and took the city. And herein is where disaster befalls these poor soldiers. You see, for the first time, colored troops were given the responsibility to fight and lead the way. No more supply and behind-the-scenes service duty. These men were being trusted to fight, which was previously not even considered even among the Northern Army. This was a big deal, a big test, and like so often for Northern soldiers, they were led poorly to a disaster not of their own making. So what no one anticipated in planning the attack was that the blast was so powerful and created such a massive hole in the Confederate line that the onrushing soldiers, once in, could not climb the steep walls to get out. They needed to get to the top to secure the breach from a rebel counterattack, but they were trapped at the bottom with no cover, just sitting ducks. Quick reacting rebel soldiers ran to the edge and opened fire at the trapped soldiers below. A massacre ensued, not helped by the rebel reaction to seeing black troops attacking them. Southern racist fury erupted, and the slaughter was on. Afterwards, the drunk general was dismissed, and word went round that despite the slaughter, these colored troops could fight. So the attack failed, and it would be 9 more grueling months of hell before Grant finally took the cities. Well, after a long day touring the Petersburg battlefield and an afternoon swimming with friends in Richmond, Little Bear and I were refreshed, and that evening made the drive to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. By now, Little Bear had a habit of crashing on the pillows and was one exhausted little puppy. Sweet, my buddy, but completely wiped out. In the morning, with great anticipation, we headed to General Lee's newly restored Gettysburg headquarters. So first, a quick overview and perspective of what you will see shortly. This aerial view is the area where the Battle of Gettysburg was fought, centered on the town itself. Day 2 and 3 of the battle saw the action south of town after Federal troops retreated, were reinforced, and formed a defensive line on Cemetery Ridge, after enduring attacks by 2/3 of the rebel army from the west and north. But it is this northern section of Day 1 we're focusing on, where General Lee situated his headquarters late in the day and was the epicenter for much of Day 1's fighting. This is the Cashtown Pike, where divisions of A.P. Hill's Corps advanced towards Gettysburg and engaged John Buford's cavalry that began the battle. And this is McPherson's Ridge, where the Federal First Corps deployed across the Cashtown Pike. And these woods are where General John Reynolds was killed. And here is the railroad cut, where Wisconsin's famed Iron Brigade earned their heroic reputation. Those were some brave and tough dudes. And nearby is where one of the largest capture of Union soldiers occurred during the war, on and adjacent to Lee's headquarters. So now, zooming into Lee's headquarters, you can better understand the ground that Little Bear and I walked. The overhead was taken during reconstruction of the site, so not as lush as it is today. So this used to be a hotel, but wisely the Civil War Trust, in conjunction with others, bought it out and restored General Lee's Gettysburg headquarters. So let's go have a look. Can you imagine the flurry of activity around here for 3 days? Messengers coming and going, generals reporting in. Looking out across McPherson Ridge, the primary battle of Day 1 of the Gettysburg campaign. In case you thought I was alone, I have little traveler here, my Union and Confederate war horse. So this road is the Cashtown Road, and way about 10 miles down that road is Cashtown Gap, where Lee's Army, A.P. Hill's division, started down this road and engaged the Union artillery right here at McPherson Ridge. Behind this copse of trees are some woods where, when the infantry of the Union finally arrived, the First Corps under John Reynolds, arguably one of the best Union generals in the Army, it was there in those woods in the distance that he was killed on the around midday of the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. That was a tremendous loss for the Union Army, and in fact that he had been mortally wounded with one shot instantly off his horse was kept from his corps because they were worried about morale. So this is a scene of some horrible fighting on Day 1. The Union was pushed back to behind me into the town of Gettysburg and ultimately south of town to the Cemetery Ridge. So Day 1 was definitely a Confederate victory, not so much Day 2, and certainly not Day 3. So let's go have a look at what we can see. Hey, what are you doing, Bear? A crazy dog. He's having fun rolling in the grass. He thinks this is great fun. Quite the adventure. Anyway, let's see what they've done here, because this is the first visit back to Gettysburg since they completed the headquarters. It took several years. As I say, this used to be a motel. with the headquarters attached as a tourist thing, but it really wasn't consistent with the times. Obviously, there was no motel in 1863. So the Civil War Trust, much to their credit, purchased the land and renovated it back to its original condition, which is pretty darn cool. And as you can see, this was all mud. Even though it had not rained, it was pretty mucky during the battle because you had so many people coming and going. And I'm going to put a picture up. I'm going to put a picture up of what this place looked like at the time. It's kind of neat for me, who studied the war for so many years in depth, to be able to stand here knowing that Lee was here. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. You can't be that hot already. Come on. He did this all day yesterday at Petersburg too. Every time he found shadow, he'd just lie down in the cool grass. Can we go see the front of the building? Come on, Goofy. So one of the original photographs of this building showed this doghouse. And it's kind of cute that they've rebuilt it and made this place as authentic as they possibly could. This little pergola thing was all covered in vines at the time, and I see they've planted some roses here, so perhaps it will be again in time. And just over the peak of those houses is the famous cupola of the Lutheran cemetery, where the Union cavalry commander, Buford, oversaw the battle. Okay. Oh, there's something I didn't know. Austin was the dog's name. Oh, there you go. Come on, buddy. You can't go in there. Oh, you're all tangled up again. So Lee's headquarters. As I said, never seen it before since the renovation. And I'm so delighted they've done this. You know, there is a multi-year program underway right now to restore the battlefield to the exact conditions that were found in 1863. Because some of the woods have disappeared, some of them have come up that weren't there. And so they're trying to restore everything to the way it was, which is pretty neat. Okay. Well, that's the end of a long week. Okay, which way do you want to go? We're going to head home. Yeah, I think he wants out of the heat. You want out of the heat, don't you, buddy? Okay. Okay, so that's Lee's headquarters. It is 9:17 on Tuesday, July 2nd. And I wanted to go over to Gettysburg National Cemetery because there are 4 Canadians buried there. 3 with the Michigan troops and 1 with Wisconsin. And I wanted to visit their graves. But quite frankly, it's already 92 degrees and the humidity is gross. And we've been in this all week. Even though it's 9:17 in the morning, I think this little guy and this big guy are going home. So we'll be home in 6 hours, and that's it. It was a great week of Civil War and visiting friends and traveling, and most importantly, finding out how Little Bear would do in the car. And he's done okay. He pants. He was a little anxious the first couple of days, but he's settled down now. He's not shaky anymore. So Come on, buddy. Whoops, can't put there. Want to say hi to everybody? What's that?